On this edition of the Celtics NESN podcast, we look at the Celtics' impressive comeback win over Giannis and the Bucks, the team's current winning streak, and a disturbing sneak peek at the Celtics' city uniforms. Let's get it. Welcome back to the NESN Celtics podcast. I'm your host, Chris Grenham, joined as always by Adam London. We are recording on Thursday, one day after the Celtics came back to beat the Milwaukee Bucks 116-105. It was a 19-point comeback, something that I didn't really foresee happening after a atrocious first half. Like I said, they trailed by 19 points at one point. Adam, we can get right into it. I mean, what do you think? That was kind of improbable, right? I didn't really see that coming.
Yeah, and I think the most encouraging sign coming off last season was last year's team, I think it's fair to say, would have folded.
Yeah.
They had such a bad issue with trying to come back in games that, even in games that weren't insurmountable comeback or deficits, they kind of got defeated very quickly.
Yeah, when things went bad, it was so bad.
Right, and as a fan, last night really was one of those games where it was so frustrating, where they were hovering in that, 12 to 17 being down range, right, and they just couldn't get to that 10 single digit.
They couldn't get over the hump.
Right, and then when they finally did, they never looked back, and they just stepped on their throats after that.
It was kind of bizarre. Once they did get over that point, it seemed like towards the end they were almost targeting Giannis at the end, which it's a bold move.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, I think a lot of that starts with Marcus Smart. He did a really, really good job on Giannis. He guarded him for 17 partial possessions, as NBA Stats classifies it. Only gave up one field goal to him, and then across 37 other possessions, he gave up no field goals. So it starts with him on the defensive end, but Kemba kind of pointed out after the game, they need to let their defense dictate their offense,
right,
not vice versa.
Right.
Because if if they were to do it vice versa, they would have folded. They would have collapsed after the first half.
And it was awesome seeing how well they were thriving in transition last night too. I mean, you could see just the energy they had when they would get a stop, go down and get a good shot. And if they keep building off games like this, they're going to be a scary team.
And the crowd was also pretty unbelievable for a Wednesday night game, middle of the week. I mean, I don't know. It was obviously it's the Bucks. The Bucks are arguably the best team in the Eastern Conference, right there alongside the Sixers. So it doesn't take a lot to grab the energy there, but the crowd certainly helped. In terms of scoring, you want to start with Kemba?
Yeah, I think the thing with Kemba, which was what we said coming off that ugly first game against the Sixers, is he just needed to see a couple shots fall consistently, right, and he's taken off. And he struggled out of the gate in their second game against the Raptors, another pretty ugly first half.
Yeah.
And then he woke up in the second half, a great win against Toronto, and he hasn't looked back since then. We've seen back-to-back 32-point games, and he's starting to look like the guy that they envisioned when they signed him over the offseason.
I mean, he was 14 of 15 from three. Yeah. From the free throw line. And like he said after the game, you can't expect to get 15 free throw attempts per game. But for a team that really struggled last year to get to the line at all, right, let alone convert those chances, that's huge. I mean, he was 11 for 11 in the second half. I think Jason Tatum can probably learn some things from him in terms of not settling, really getting to the cup is something that Kemba Walker does well, even with his size or lack thereof. So that was really great. But, again, you can't really expect to do that. I think we noted this after the Sixers game last week. They didn't hit their free throws last week. No. The Celtics did do that. They were 17 of 21 from the charity stripe, which is huge. I mean, in a game, they ultimately won by 11 points, but down the stretch when they were hovering around that 10-point cushion for what felt like the last 10 minutes, it wasn't really that comfortable. I felt like the Bucks could have jumped back in it at any point. So free throws were probably my biggest takeaway, I would say, from Kemba.
Yeah, and you mentioned Kemba being able to get to the rack. I think last year, and it's kind of been the way his whole career, I think Kyrie sometimes is plagued by his own craftiness.
Yeah.
Like, he's so good at getting to the basket that even when he generates that contact, he's not getting the benefit of the doubt because he kind of gets there, so smoothly that it doesn't really look like fouls. Where Kemba has that IT factor in him where he's a smaller guy, and you can tell when he drives to the basket, big men are just terrified almost to knock down on him because they're going to get called for a foul.
Right.
And he's able to, he kind of backs his way in there, and he's pretty good at the rim. And like you said, if they can become a consistent free throw shooting team, there's going to be that more fluid of an offense.
Yeah, and so that's 3 straight 20-point games for him. He's now averaging 28.7 points on 44.8% shooting over that 3-game span. So nice stretch for him. Gordon Hayward, I thought, I would say had one of his best games in a Celtics uniform, but his first half was relatively atrocious.
Yeah.
Like the rest of the team, it was pretty bad. The second half was phenomenal. Overall, in 38 minutes, he finished with 21 points, 10 boards, and 7 assists on 9 of 17 shooting. If you can get that from him, I'm not asking for that every single night, but on a relatively consistent basis, they're going to be a tough team to stop. I don't know how many teams can match up with guys like him, Kemba, and Tatum, and when Jaylen Brown returns. That's a tough team to match up with.
Yeah, I think like we were saying last time, the thing with Hayward is if he just keeps racking up these games where he's being productive on both ends of the floor and getting up his shots, the more confident he becomes, where he's going to start looking like the Hayward from Utah and the player they envisioned when they signed him to that huge deal a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he was in 21 second-half minutes. He was 7 of 9, 2 of 3 from deep. He had 6 assists in the second half, and he was a plus 18 for 16 points. That's pretty ridiculous.
I'd say, too, out of all of the Celtics starters, I'd say Hayward, and this honestly might have something to do with him still being mildly hesitant, is that most of his shots are good shots.
Yeah.
He's rarely forcing it.
Right.
And you saw last night, and if he didn't have like a wide open shot, he was just generating a little space and getting up those close range shots. And he's not playing with outside of himself. He knows exactly what his game is right now, and he's trying to make the most of it.
Yeah, I thought Tatum was the same way. He was 8 of 12 in the second half, 4 of 4 from deep. He was a plus 26, which was obviously a game high. And he had 20 points. On the night, he had 25, and he was 10 of 22 from the floor. So, again, kind of a tale of two halves like this entire game was for the Celtics. But, again, he was looking for good shots.
Yeah.
Where in the first half, he was settling. I'm not sure if this is going to continue, but Celtics fans and Celtics Twitter could quickly flip their switch from angry about mid-range jumpers to angry about floaters.
Yeah.
He keeps settling for this weird foul line floater type deal. I'm not really sure where that came from or when it started. I really started noticing it last night. But I think Brad Stevens talked about it after the game. The fact that they were targeting good shots, which again, in my opinion, starts with you let the defense dictate your offense and you play from there. And you mentioned it before, their transition game was better, which always helps. Shot selection. Let's go back to Marcus Smart, who was, really great against Giannis. You can't necessarily bank on him being your big man defender. But the Celtics as a whole, they drew 3 charges against Giannis last night. I know Smart drew one of them. They lead the NBA in charges drawn. So in that sense, they match up kind of well against Giannis. But as a whole, they really shouldn't match up that well against the Bucks, right? Or especially Giannis.
Yeah,
because they're undersized.
And Smart was saying after the game last night, they asked him about going up against Giannis, and he was saying how he constantly kept feeling Giannis, push back on him and stuff.
Right.
And he knew he was like, I'm getting in his head.
He was getting to him.
So even if Giannis is going to get his points. That's just a fact. But to see him noticeably get frustrated, that's pretty much the only way you can play Giannis is try to just get him even mildly off his game.
Yeah, and I thought the rest of the Celtics defense is kind of, obviously they're not in the headlines because people love talking about Smart. They love talking about his defense, and that's fine. He was, without question, the best Celtics defender, did a phenomenal job on Giannis last night. But as a whole, I thought the Celtics were really good on the defensive end. The fact that Giannis had 22, Middleton had 26, and that was really it. George Hill had 12 off the bench. Brook Lopez had 10. There was no one else in double figures. And realistically, after starting off pretty solid from beyond the arc and really shooting as a whole, they kind of shut him down. And granted, some of the shots just weren't falling for guys like Wesley Matthews and some of the role guys. I think Matthews was like he was 1 for 8 from the field. So I thought the Celtics as a whole were solid defensively, and that's really where a lot of this is going to kind of start with this team, it seems like.
Right, yeah, and we saw it too with Shemi. I mean, and you typically, I mean, I don't want to speak for all Celtics fans, but I imagine most of them just following Twitter and whatnot don't want to see Shemi in a tight game against the Bucks in the final couple minutes of the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
But it was kind of situations where it's like, don't fix it if it's not broken. And he was doing fine on Giannis. I'd probably say second best as far as just going one-on-one against him behind Smart. But yeah, it is totally a team effort, and I felt like you said that collectively they did a solid job on him.
Yeah, I mean, his defensive rating, he was 95.5, which was second best on the team. I'm sorry, it wasn't second best on the team. It was like fourth best on the team. But for someone who played 20 minutes, he had the second best net rating on the team at 30.7. So in 19 minutes, he gave them some quality time. Whereas against the Sixers last week in the season opener, he kind of really wasn't serving a purpose out there. I mean, just kind of seemed to fall flat. But it's nice that you can get some minutes out of him that are quality. But as a whole, if you're going to take some negatives from this win last night, which was, don't get me wrong, it was a phenomenal win. Obviously, the first half was bad. But there's not a lot of depth on this Celtics team, like at all. I mean, you got Tice played 28 minutes, and the rest of the starting lineup played 38-plus minutes.
Right.
So you only have Grant Williams, Shemi Ojale, and Robert Williams playing double-digit minutes off the bench. Carson Edwards didn't even play in the second half.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not getting anything from Romeo Langford. Poirier still has yet to play. I mean, there's not a lot of depth here.
No, and conversely, when you saw the Bucks second unit come out, that's when I thought it was going to get really ugly for the Celtics. I mean, the starters had already jumped out to a pretty sizable lead for Milwaukee, and then you're seeing guys right off the bat like Ilyasova, Hill, Korver come in and the Celtics just don't have that second unit surge. So that's going to be interesting to see as going forward how much the Celtics are going to be able to get from those guys.
Yeah, and Adam Himmelsbach from the Boston Globe tweeted it out earlier today, but it's going to be pretty crucial if they do want to get some depth out of those rookies like Grant Williams, Carson Edwards. Carson Edwards has the range, so guys are going to have to play him along the perimeter. But if you watched last night, they were giving Grant Williams a large cushion because teams just don't trust him. He's 0 for 6 now on the season. He was 0 for 2 from deep last night in 15 minutes. He had 2 points, 2 rebounds. But for him to be effective off the bench, they're going to need him to stretch the floor a little bit, which right now he can't do. And realistically, the only guy in a situation like last night when Jaylen Brown is hurt, and they're not going to have a full squad every single night. So if they're missing a guy like Jaylen Brown or missing a guy like Smart or Kemba or whatever, the only guy who can shoot off the bench is Carson Edwards. Right. And he played 4 minutes last night. Right. So they're going to need some shooting from a guy like Grant Williams.
No, and with Williams, too, to me, just from these early impressions, he seems like a guy who's on a fast track to being hit with all those cliches that Marcus Smart gets. Yep. He makes winning plays.
Yeah,
and not everything.
He's a big plus-minus guy.
Right, and not everything he does shows up on the box sheet.
Yeah.
But, what I like about and what I've seen from Williams so far is that he's not really playing like a rookie.
Right.
And when he does, he quickly jumps out of it. I think the microcosm of that last night was when the Celtics were really getting close to tying up the game, and he had made a really bad turnover and just immediately got it right back.
Right.
And that's something not most rookies can pull off. And the fact that he already has that wherewithal and that ability to push off bad plays and make a good one on the next sequence is pretty encouraging.
Yeah, he certainly has a better basketball IQ than most rookies. I mean, you saw it last Friday against the Raptors. He played 22 minutes and closing crunch time minutes against some pretty good bigs in Marc Gasol, Pascal Siakam, Serge Ibaka. Serge Ibaka is a pretty mobile big, so that kind of suits Williams well, who moves relatively well for his bulkier size. But he had 7 rebounds and 4 assists in 22 minutes. Again, he was 0 for 3 from 3, but he wasn't really playing a stretch role per se against the Raptors. So the fact of the matter is, if he's not going to be able to shoot that consistently off the bench, they're going to look for him to play that kind of undersized big role, which I think is not a bad thing necessarily.
And I think another thing Williams fits too is, last year, despite having guys like Terry and Morris, that team wasn't really gritty.
Yeah.
It was just kind of, they were just, we know what happened.
Right.
And this team, I think we saw, like, they're not going to quit. They're going to they're going to grind out every game. And Williams fits that, we might not be the most talented, but we're going to give you one hell of a fight every single night.
And Kemba kept saying that after the game. He's like, they're tough when things go wrong. They're not going to buy in. And I think listening to Brad and Kemba talk about, during halftime, they stuck together in the huddles. Brad Stevens was talking about how Kemba Walker was really showing, a stick-to-itiveness kind of thing. That was not there last year at all. And whether that goes back to Kyrie or Marcus Morris or wherever you want to point the finger, it wasn't there. And so the fact of the matter is they can be down. You're not going to look for them to trail by 19 points in the first half, but they're not out of it.
No, and it's kind of surprising that the Celtics already have that trait, because that, will to keep fighting through is something you usually see amongst teams that have been together for a while.
Yeah, it's their third or fourth year together.
And this team is almost entirely brand new. There's only a handful of guys that are there from last season. So the fact that they're already playing this way and playing together so well is a good sign for this team moving forward.
And one more thing before we move past this game, I think we should note that Daniel Theis was pretty good. Daniel Theis is starting at center at 6'8", which is not ideal against a long, big team like the Bucks. He was pretty good. I thought he did what he had to do to kind of hold his own. He hit let's see, where was this? It was in the second half, I believe. Yeah. So he was 1 of 2 from 3 in the fourth quarter. I think I wasn't crazy about him hawking up a 3, but the fact that he can provide that here and there is pretty good. But you got to give credit to Theis. He was pretty good.
Yeah, and I think with how pedestrian the Celtics' interior depth is right now, I think just okay nights like that will be taken as very high positives.
Exactly.
And I think Theis, too, the more run he gets, this is obvious, but the more run he gets, he's going to, just mature his game. And
he'll get more and more comfortable. Right. Yeah, he was 28 minutes. He was 5 of 8 from the field, 9 boards, 11 points. I think the Celtics will take that any day of the week. If you want, we can now move towards some extremely serious topics, something that we really need to discuss.
For sure.
And I think everyone has gotten a glimpse of them. Enes Kanter earlier this week gave everyone, probably much to the Celtics probably weren't thrilled about this, but Enes Kanter, before removing it on his Instagram story, gave everyone a preview of the Celtics' new alternate jerseys. I think they're technically their city uniforms.
I think that's what they're called.
Yeah, Nike has all these names for whatever jerseys they have. These weren't great, to put it very lightly.
No, and when I remember seeing when the NBA went through that T-shirt phase a couple years ago, and the Celtics had those gray ones, I remember thinking it will never get worse than this.
This was pretty bad.
We saw those first clips of Kanter's on Kanter's Instagram. I was like, wow, they did it. They actually somehow
got worse.
Luckily, we found out they're not that weird.
They're not actually teal, which is phenomenal. It's like, first off, I'm okay with the old the Patty's Pub looking font. Yeah. That's fine. It's got the Irish feel, whatever. That's fine. But if it's on green, it's fine. If it's on this weird teal that I'm staring at right now, it's disgusting. So everyone around the team is saying, everyone is being told that they're not teal. And Kanter came out with the Motorola Razr comment, which was kind of funny. But if they were that teal color, that's really, really disgusting.
Yeah, I'm also holding out hope that sometimes it's tough to gauge a jersey just from a picture like that.
Yeah, so, that's true.
And also, when you see them all wearing them together and actually on the court, hopefully, but yeah, early impressions, not great.
Not great. Not something you want to see when you're trying to develop a team throughout the year. Another thing you don't want to see if you're say, a front office executive or a head coach is a fight on the court from a fan's perspective and from our perspective. I personally love it. Last night we had Karl Anthony Towns and Joel Embiid go at it. We had Joel Embiid shadow boxing as he left the court in Philadelphia. I mean, for most Celtics fans, they probably despise Embiid, despise the Sixers, which is fair. But I have to put myself in a Sixers fan's shoes. If I was at that game last night and he was shadowboxing and riling up the crowd, I think I would have gone and bought an Embiid jersey like on my way out of that place. I would have been so jacked up.
Right. I think Embiid's that classic, you love him when he's on your team,
Totally.
hate him because he's an absolute monster on the court and he's not going to back down from a single person.
Yeah.
But on the other side, I actually was kind of encouraged from Towns' perspective because I think Towns, purely from his game alone, maybe he's been unfairly tagged with this like soft label because he does play a finesse game and
he does.
He's not like a power big.
Yeah.
And the fact that, he didn't back down from Embiid and not only didn't back down on the court, he's still ripping off tweets.
I was just looking at their Instagram back and forth and their tweets back and forth. I mean, it certainly creates, quite a back and forth. Apparently, Towns is saying that Embiid deleted his comment while Embiid is saying, I don't know, there's a weird back and forth. But in terms of the whole this league mantra, I mean, this is prime.
If Adam Silver is trying to appease the fans as much as he can, if he can work some magic. I was looking at it today. The Sixers and T-Wolves unfortunately don't play again until late March.
Yeah, that's depressing.
We need to alter that schedule and get them playing next week.
You could go schedule on the fly, put some flex games in here, and make that happen because that would be absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. I think I would definitely take the Sixers in that fight for sure, for the sole fact that Mike Scott is on the bench.
It killed me. I mean, Mike Scott just being on that's the type of environment that Mike Scott thrives in.
That's his environment. Yeah,
and he was just eating it up.
Did you see his reaction?
It was
amazing.
Vintage.
It was amazing. I mean, it's Mike Scott for those who don't know him is a forward for the Sixers who is probably one of the tougher guys in the NBA. Definitely not a fake tough guy like a lot of NBA guys get the rep of being. He actually fought, was it a Redskins fan at an Eagles game this year?
It kills me that Mike Scott's like a professional athlete and just gets in scraps, gets in tailgates.
Absolute scraps. Like there were, because he is from Virginia. He's a DMV guy, so I'm pretty sure he was wearing a Redskins jersey or a Redskins gear at an Eagles game. So Eagles fans were, chirping him, so he started to, he fought him, which I guess is one way to go about it when you're 6'8", 240.
It's one more, speaking of on-brand reactions from that whole ordeal, that couldn't have been more Al Horford.
Just standing, I mean, come on.
Standing there outside on the edge, hands on his hips, being like, all right.
I don't have time for this.
I'm going to let these kids be kids.
Yeah.
I'll go back to playing extremely fundamental basketball.
Yeah, extremely fundamental basketball. I will apologize to anyone who, I lay a hard foul on. That was extremely on brand. Other notes around the NBA. Steph Curry broke his left hand last night.
Yeah,
where are they going to go from here?
My prediction of the Warriors getting the 7th seed is not looking great.
Yeah, no.
And I was reading this somewhere today, and it's crazy that we're already thinking about this 4 games in. Is like, if you're Golden State, do you already think about kind of closing up shop and getting a higher draft pick?
It's not It's kind of a weird in between. I mean, it's not that far outside of the realm of possibilities, which is just absurd.
Yeah.
I mean, what did D'Angelo Russell last night? He had 15 points. He was 5 of 12. He's not really carrying the load all that well. I don't think you want to rely on Draymond Green to carry the load all that well. I mean,
and that's
probably something that should be discussed.
Right, and if they just really, really struggle while Steph is out, and even when he comes back, I think Russell is one of those guys. If you're going all in on the future, maybe you look at selling at the deadline.
Yeah, and you totally could. And it was funny when he initially got traded to Golden State. People talked about he's not going to be there for that long. But think about it. If they do go the tank route, which is wild at this point, but say they do. Say they close up shop. Things go really poorly, and at the end of November they say, all right, this is not worth it. They start looking into options to sell off D'Lo. and they go and look towards James Wiseman or Anthony Edwards or Cole Anthony, even LaMelo Ball, it does set up kind of well for them, right?
Right, and then you're going with a team with a high draft pick, plus the core three that you already won a title with.
Suddenly you have James Wiseman added into Draymond Green, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson. Like, it's just really, you took a year off,
right?
But you're totally fine.
No, and we've seen it in other sports. You saw, I mean, granted they haven't gone to won the whole thing, but the Cowboys took 1 year off, got Zeke Elliott.
Totally fine. Yeah, and they're fine. So it's an absurd thing to say, but it's not that far-fetched at this point.
And I think it's really not that absurd, not so much from what the Warriors have, but just how strong the West is. Like, I mean, your Phoenix Suns might even make a run at it now.
I am. At first, it was a little satirical. I am now dead serious on the Phoenix Suns, to the point where one of my roommates and I earlier this week stayed up and were watching a Suns Jazz game on a Monday night, and I was locked in. Like Aaron Baines, Kelly Oubre, Dario Saric, they had me locked in. But if you look at this team on paper, and I am dead serious right now, if you look at this team on paper, they're really good defensively, which is something the Suns have not been in years past.
Right.
They have a point guard in Ricky Rubio, which is something Devin Booker hasn't had in years past. And they're relatively efficient, which Devin Booker has never been. That was never the case. But a starting lineup of Aaron Baines, Devin Booker, Dario Saric, Ricky Rubio, and Kelly Oubre, with guys like Mikal Bridges and Javon Carter coming off the bench, that's a pretty good team.
No, and it's a very interesting blend of obviously the finesse players like Booker, and then you just got that grit with Baines.
Right.
And I think with the Suns, too, they just needed even a flare of competence.
Right.
We know how poor that front office is, and just how, in general, Monty Williams is a good coach. I mean,
100%.
And I think his presence there, and he knows how to run these guys.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on them being a playoff team, but I think
I'll get you there.
I think they're going to be a pretty, at least at a bare minimum, a very entertaining team.
They're suitable and they're entertaining, which is something for the Suns that is, there is progress there. Yeah. I mean, they've lost 2 games by a total of 2 points this year to the Jazz and to the Nuggets, who are both, again, very good teams. I have no doubt they'll give it to the Grizzlies on, I think, Friday or Saturday, whenever they play next. But like, that's a good team for now. But I think it bodes to your point, which is, other than some teams like the Kings, who are off to an atrocious 0-5 start, like, the West is really deep and really, really good.
I mean, the Pelicans are one of the, I think there's either 2 or 3 winless teams left.
Yeah.
All of their games have been decided by like 8 to 4 points. I mean, they've been in every single. I mean, every game out west, I think, is going to be a dogfight.
Yeah, if you don't have League Pass, I would strongly consider getting it. I think it's definitely worth it for the sole purpose of being able to watch some West Coast games. If you're a gambler, you could sweat out plenty of late night games. I mean, my God. But even the Thunder, who are 1-4, they've lost some close games. They have a lot of good upside with guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like, there are good teams there. The East, not quite. I would say your Bulls are 1-4, sitting in the basement right now, but they've lost a couple of close games.
They were close, but they're still inexcusable. Like, you can't have that commanding of a lead against the hapless Knicks and blow it.
Lose by 7, that's tough.
And then to follow up with another loss against arguably an even worse
You can't lose to the
team.
Cavaliers. You cannot lose to the Cavaliers.
And it's funny because all the selling points we were just saying about the Suns, I think a lot of the same things you can say about the Bulls. I'm not off the bandwagon yet, but it's not looking good. I do think I was actually talking with our colleague Logan Mullen about this. That
big Bulls guy.
Right, both of us. I think Hoiberg actually would have done well with this team because he got jumped onto a pretty veteran team when it was, D Wade, Rondo, Jimmy was still there. And I don't, to be honest, I don't really know if they respected him that much.
I don't think so,
And I think Boylan would have fit that team where he kind of gets the game.
He does not fit this group.
No, like I read somewhere he's like actually making them clock in.
He put in a time, think about this. He, in some crazy world, thinks Zach LaVine and Wendell Carter and Chris Dunn want to clock into work and clock out of work.
I mean, those guys are so young, they might not even know how those things work.
There's no shot. Chris Dunn knows how to punch in and out of work.
Right.
No chance. Yeah. And if Lauri Markkanen's walking in, he's probably going to be like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Like, let me go somewhere else where I'm not going to have to do push-ups and suicides after practice. I thought that was done when I was 10 years old, which for Markkanen was basically 2 years ago. But either way, we could talk about the basement of both conferences for quite some time, but I think we'll wrap it up there for now. Do you have anything else Celtics related going forward to keep an eye out? They play the Knicks at home, TD Garden, on Friday night. That's a 7:30 tip.
So before that, we are taping this on Halloween.
Right.
And you were at the game last night. During a brief break in the action, the Celtics players revealed what their favorite candy is.
They did.
Just judging by his answer, I'm not totally sure Gordon Hayward has ever had candy before.
Robin might not let him.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
To just say king-size candy bars.
Is that really what he said?
That's what he said.
That's
according to a tweet I saw. I think that was a case of they asked him and he's like, what will be a good answer?
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm just going to say
big ones.
Big candies.
Big candies, yeah. That's a huge problem. Every like jump at his game that we spoke about at the beginning of this episode probably pulls it right back.
And I think it was just peak Marcus Smart to, instead of saying his favorite candy, he was just going the opposite. He's like, I'm going to tell you the worst one instead, which was candy corn, which is correct.
Yeah, candy corn is terrible.
That's the objectively correct answer.
Yes.
Another one, Jaylen Brown, you can't say mini Snickers. You got to go regular size.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, I don't know what you're going for there. I also thought it was pretty interesting Tatum said nerds. You don't really hear nerds get a lot of love.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. That's kind of bizarre. I can't really get over the King. I didn't really pay attention to this segment when I was at the game last night on the Jumbotron, but him saying strictly king-size candy bars is really, really tough.
It's weird because it's not wrong, but it's just such a bizarre answer.
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah. And Grant Williams said Sour Patch Kids and actually was talking about Sour Patch Kids before the game and I'll leave his name anonymous, had a reporter deliver Sour Patch Kids to him post-game. So
Big Sour Patch Kids guy.
Big Sour Patch Kids guy. He's getting them delivered post-game in the locker room. I'm not sure how crazy the Celtics training staff and nutrition staff is about that, but I guess it's that kind of year. Daniel Tice said Kit Kats, right?
He did.
Okay, that's my guy then. I'm all in on Tice because when I was growing up, at least around this time of year, in terms of like going trick-or-treating and stuff, that's what I was loading up on.
I was thinking too that Grant Williams seems so pure that I wouldn't put it past him going trick-or-treating.
No, 100%.
Because and he's been like a very staunch, like, I want to be a part of the community
I'm
guy.
going to engulf myself in Boston.
I could see him hitting up the group text and being like, guys, what time do you want to go trick-or-treating tonight?
Yeah.
And they're like, Grant, we're not 13 years old.
Yeah, or just getting completely fam. No response
like,
whatsoever.
Fine, I'll go on Instagram and
I'll
just
go
see
find
if
a couple
wants
kids.
to
Yeah,
come
I'll
with
go
me.
meet up with a family in Brighton and take their Celtics fan child trick-or-treating. Either way, if you live in the Boston area, I guess keep an eye out for Grant Williams because he very well might still want to go trick-or-treating. Either way, again, Celtics take on the Knicks. Hopefully, they can get their second win in less than a week against the Knicks on Friday night at TD Garden. We'll be back next Thursday to discuss if Grant Williams did go trick-or-treating and the rest of the news around the Boston Celtics.
Get out the way.